knew how to set my feet on the ground. But when the soul is in a rapture, the body remains as it were dead, being often unable to do anything at all of herself. And as it happens to be at the time, so it remains, whether it be in a sitting posture, or whether the hands be opened or closed. For though she loses her senses a few times, and the same has happened to me now and then, yet they have been seldom entirely lost, and then only for a short time. The usual effect is, that she is disturbed a little, and though she can do nothing of herself, as far as regards the exterior, yet she is able to both understand and to hear, as if something were spoken to her from far off. I say not that she understands and hears when she is in the very height of her rapture. I use the words "the very height" at that time when the faculties are lost, because they are very closely united with God. And then, in my opinion, she neither sees nor hears. But as I mentioned in the former prayer of union, this total transformation of the soul into God continues only for a short time, but as long as it lasts, no power of the soul either feels or knows what passes there. And it seems to be for this object, that as long as we live in this world, it is not God's will we should understand what passes there, because we are not capable of understanding it. At least, I myself have experienced this. But your reverence will perhaps ask me, how is it that rapture should sometimes last so many hours? I answer, that what happened to me very often, as I have mentioned in the former prayer, is this, that we enjoy raptures only by intervals, and the soul often engulfs herself, or rather, to speak more correctly, our Lord engulfs the soul in Himself, and as He keeps her there for a while, there remains only her will which she can make use of. As to the exercise of those other two powers, it seems to me to be like that of a needle on a sundial, which never stands still, but yet when the Sun of Justice wishes, He makes them stop. This, I say, lasts but for a short time. As, however, the impulse and exaltation of the spirit were great, the will remains engulfed, and acts like a sovereign lady over all the operations of the body, because those other two restless powers wish to disturb her. The senses, however, do not disturb her. And thus they also are suspended, because our Lord is so pleased. The eyes, too, are mostly shut, though we may not wish to shut them. And if sometimes they be open, yet, as I have already mentioned, the soul does not consider nor advert to what she sees. The body is now much less able to do anything of herself, and even after the three powers have been united, it can do but little. Let him, therefore, to whom our Lord shall grant this favor, not be astonished when he sees the body so weak for many hours, and his memory and understanding sometimes so apt to wander. True it is that souls are ordinarily, in this state, drowned in the praises of God, and in desiring to comprehend or understand what has taken place in them. And even for this object they are not wholly awake, but like a person who has slept and dreamt a great deal, and is not yet quite awake. I have thus explained myself at some length, because I know there are persons at this time, and even in this place, on whom our Lord has bestowed these favors. And if those who direct these religious have not experience in these matters, they will perhaps think, especially if they be not learned, that in these raptures the persons are as it were dead. It is a subject of grief to consider how much one suffers from such confessors, who do not understand these matters, as I shall afterwards mention. Perhaps I know not what I say, but your reverence will understand if I should say anything to the purpose, since our Lord has already given you experience herein. Though as it is not long since you began, you may not perhaps have considered the subject so much as I have. But though I endeavored to do so very often, and to the best of my power, yet the body has not strength enough to stir itself, for the soul takes all its strength away with her. Thus a sick person often recovers his health, and she who was full of weakness and pain regains her strength, because great favors are given in this state. And sometimes, as I was saying, our Lord is pleased that the body should experience a certain degree of joy, because it obeys what the soul desires. When she has returned to herself, it may happen, if the rapture has been great, that she will go for a day or two, or even for 3 days, with the powers so absorbed, and as it were engulfed in God, that she seems out of herself. But in this state she feels it painful to be still obliged to live in the world. For now, having lost her weak feathers, others have come strong enough to enable her to fly well. Now the banner of Christ is so directly unfurled, that there seems to remain nothing more but that the captain of this fort may either ascend himself, or be carried up to the highest tower, there to plant this standard for the glory of God. She now looks upon those who are below as one who is already in safety, for so far she is from fearing danger, that she rather wishes it, like one for whom victory is secured in a most certain manner. Now she sees very clearly how little all worldly things ought to be esteemed, and what a nothing they are. He who is in a high place sees many things. Now she does not wish to have any other will but the will of our Lord, and she gives him the keys of hers. From being a gardener, she has now become a governor. She wishes to do nothing but the will of God, nor does she desire to be the governor herself, nor indeed of anything, not even of a single well in this garden. And if there be anything good in it, she wishes His Majesty to divide the fruits thereof, for from that time forward she desires nothing of her own, but only that all things may be done in conformity with His will and for His glory. Everything happens in this way truly and really, if the raptures be real, and the soul enjoys the effects and advantages which I have mentioned. But if such are not the effects, I should doubt much whether the raptures come from God, but should rather be inclined to fear they were of that kind of ravings whereof St. Vincent speaks. This I know, and through experience I have seen that here the soul remains a queen over all things, and acquires in less than an hour so much liberty, that she is not able to know herself. But yet she knows well all this is not her own, nor does she know how she came to obtain so great a blessing. Still she understands clearly the exceeding great advantage which every one of these raptures brings with it. No one can believe all this but he who has experienced it himself, and therefore men cannot believe that a poor soul, which they knew was before so wicked, can so soon undertake to do such wonderful things, because she immediately resolves not to be content with serving our Lord in small things, but to serve Him in most difficult matters also. But men are apt to imagine that such resolutions are only temptations and foolishness. But if they would consider that they come not from herself, but from our Lord, to whom she has already given up the keys of her will, they would not wonder so much at it. I am of opinion, that a soul which arrives at this state neither says nor does anything of herself, but this sovereign King takes care of everything which is to be done. O my God! How clearly does a soul see here the meaning of that verse, "Who will give me the wings of a dove?" The prophet David had reason to make this request, and so have we all. That flight is clearly meant which the soul takes, in order to raise herself above all creatures, and before all things above herself. But this flight is sweet. It is a pleasant flight, and a flight without noise. What dominion does such a soul possess which our Lord conducts to this degree, that she looks down upon all things without being entangled by them? How full of confusion is she for the time in which she was entangled by them! How astonished at her blindness! How full of compassion for those who still remain in this blindness, especially if they be people of prayer, and such as God is pleased to caress! She desires to cry aloud, that so all may understand how much they have been deceived, and this she does sometimes, and then men pour down upon her head 1,000 persecutions. They treat her as having but little humility, and as one who wishes to teach those from whom she ought rather to learn, especially if she be a woman. Then they condemn her, and perhaps they have reason for so doing, because they know not by what impulse she is moved. And as she knows not how to help herself on the one hand, so on the other she cannot forbear undeceiving those persons whom she loves, and whom she desires to behold free from the prison of this life. For the state wherein she was seems neither more nor less than a prison. She is much afflicted at the thought of that time in which she attended to points of honor, and for the error and deceit into which she fell, by believing that to be honor which the world calls honor. She sees that it is a very gross lie, and that all men live in the practice of it. But now she understands that real honor is not false, but true, and she esteems that to be worth